Reader Meet Writer Southern Edition featuring Kimberly McCreight with her new book, A Good Marriage. We hope to provide some retail therapy, entertainment, and distraction during this hour. I'm Wanda with the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance, and now to today's writer. Kimberly McCreight is the New York Times best-selling author of Reconstructing Amelia, which was nominated for the Edgar, Anthony, and Alex Awards, Where They Found Her, and the Outliers young adult trilogy. She attended Vassar College and graduated cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 daughters.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to see all of you. And I've never actually had one of these where I can see your faces, which I have to say is such a treat for us.
It is.
You haven't been able to go to in-person events. I haven't been able to see anybody in the audience yet. So when your faces went up there, I just got so excited. So thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for being here, Kimberly. And I want you to share your super exciting news that was announced this week.
Yes, so the big news for A Good Marriage is that it has been optioned by Nicole Kidman and Amazon Studios to be a series, which is super, super exciting and has just made the week extra thrilling for me. They actually optioned, Nicole Kidman and HBO optioned my first book, Reconstructing Amelia, and they are still working on that. So we'll see which one in the end of the day comes out first. But I'm absolutely thrilled they're involved, and they're a fantastic team, and I feel very lucky.
Well, congratulations. That's just amazing. I loved reading the book. It was so exciting. I wanted to talk about Park Slope, which is a part of Brooklyn, and it just played a real role in the book. And I was interested in what Park Slope means to you and why Park Slope was such a prevalent, almost like a character in the book.
Yeah, well, thank you. So it definitely, certainly very much feels like a character to me. So A Good Marriage is set in Park Slope, Brooklyn, which is my neighborhood. I've lived here for 15 years. And it takes place over 1 week in the summer when most of the kids are away at sleepaway camp, and their parents are gearing up for the event of the summer, which is this adults-only party with a little bit of a racy side to it. It's meant to be a little sexually adventurous, but just all in good fun every year. But this year, after the party, a woman ends up dead, and her husband is quickly accused, and he reaches out to an old law school classmate for help, and her name is Lizzie. She's actually an outsider to the neighborhood, and as she's drawn into Park Slope, she realizes that neither Zach nor her friend Zach nor his wife were who they appeared to be. And at the same time, Lizzie's own marriage is kind of falling apart, and maybe her husband isn't who he seems to be. And the book is really kind of part domestic suspense, part legal thriller, but it's really at its heart meant to be this genuine exploration of what it means to sustain a marriage over time, and the secrets couples keep and the compromises they make in order to stay together. So that's the kind of backdrop. So Park Slope, for sure, is a really big part of this book. And it's funny, Reconstructing Amelia, my first book, was also set in Park Slope. And so it's been a while since I've kind of come back to home, literally and figuratively, in writing about the neighborhood. And it's been so wonderful. And what I always find funny, and this happened when I wrote Reconstructing Amelia, people are like, so do you live in a bad neighborhood where just not bad as in dangerous, but where people are mean and kids get bullied and terrible things happen. And what's funny is I absolutely love my neighborhood. I really do. And in some ways, even though these kind of bad events happen in my books, both of them are meant to be love letters to my neighborhood in a way. But it is a unique place, and it is filled, because I think it's got more writers per capita in the zip code 11215 than anywhere else in the country. So it's filled with writers, which is a really funny experience when you have children and you're a writer and they go to elementary school at the public elementary school, and everybody has a parent who's got a book coming out, and you are not special, even a little bit ever. It's well, how many Pulitzer Prizes did your mom win? And so that's a little hard to get used to. But besides writers, it's got professors and a lot of really dynamic opinionated people. And I love it, but it is definitely colorful, and it makes it a great place to write about because you can push up against some of the stereotypes. I mean, there have been articles written about the arguments over the ice cream truck parking too close to the playground, and it's true. I mean, some of it's true, right? Like those, and taken to its extreme, does it get annoying? Sure. But some of it is somewhere in the middle lies a truth that really resonates for me. And I love that the people have such personalities and really do such interesting things. And they all work weird schedules. And again, a lot of people in the arts and reporters, a ton of journalists. So I really love it. It's also a beautiful place. It's this like brownstone area of Brooklyn, and it has Prospect Park, which is not nearly as big as, I think it's like a quarter of the size of Central Park, or maybe even less, but it's really a huge, gorgeous park. And so it's quite quiet here, actually, and very neighborhoody. And I've never lived anywhere this long. I'd only lived somewhere, I think for 3 years before I moved to Park Slope. That was the longest I had lived anywhere. So now, having lived here so long, like, you see kids grow up, and I, recognize so-and-so for, your kids have gone through all different stages. And even people I don't know, I'm like, oh, that's the guy who sings the opera when he walks down the street and he lives in that house. Like, I mean, it really feels like a small town. And that's a very unique thing for New York City, which is actually part of the reason why my books also feature private schools, because New York City public schools, which is actually where my kids go to school, are so huge that it's hard to capture that sense of intimacy that really exists in this neighborhood. So I often use private schools because then when you have a PTA meeting, there's, 30 or 40 people there instead of, at my daughter's elementary school where there would be, 400. So it's a way of capturing that feeling. And really there is this intimacy in this neighborhood, which is, you wouldn't expect in New York. Like, I always feel like I'm in a small town or on a college campus. Even like I walk to the local coffee shop and you're like, oh no, there's that person I know and I don't want to see across the street. And it really is like that. But I do love it here. And it's a gorgeous place. And so I highly recommend visiting if you ever come to New York.
Yeah, I certainly do feel like anyone who knows Park Slope is going to love reading the book. I mean, I can see how your love for it shows, I think.
Good. Well, that's good. That's good. I always want to make sure of that. I'm sure they're going to get tired of answering the question whether or not real parties like that exist in the neighborhood.
Right. Yeah.
But they'll get used to coming up with an answer.
Right. Well, it seemed like such a complicated, how does one plan a book like this? What event kicked off this story in your mind? Like, there were so many things in it. I thought, what was the seed that was like, oh, this would make a good book?
Yeah, the thing that really kicked it off was the whole question of what makes a good marriage. So I've been married 18 years, but I was also a child of divorce at a very young age. So I didn't grow up with like a marriage model, right? And so I really come to marriage being like, what is a good marriage? And like, God, now we've been married so long, and watching, and our lives, in particular, my marriage have changed a lot over time. Like, when we got married, I was a lawyer, we had a totally different dynamic. I'm an alcoholic myself. I no longer drink, and I've been sober for many, many years, for 15 years, 16, I guess. So it's as old as my daughter is. I stopped drinking before she was born. But so that's also different. Like, when we married, I was drinking, and then now I'm not. And so it just changes so much over time. And so I just was really curious about, other people's marriages. And I think a lot of mysteries have been written about the secrets that a husband keeps from a wife, and kind of the terrible things that they then do to each other. But I was more interested in what are the secrets couples keep from the world. And not even necessarily like intentionally, like they're doing something really evil in their house, but just even the secrets that are not facing themselves about their relationship, or what makes them happy and what they want. And, I often think my husband and I will go out to dinner with another couple, and they'll be arguing or something the whole time. And I come home and I'm like, wait, so do they actually hate each other, or is that just like their thing? I find it endlessly fascinating. I look at other people's marriages and I'm like, what's really going on there? Because I do believe actually that couple arguing could in fact be quite happy. It's because it's unique for every couple. They have their own dynamic. their own power balance, because each person's different, right? So some people just don't mind arguing. And in fact, in terms of arguing, my husband and I actually argue quite a lot. It's just our style, and it doesn't bother us. And for other people, that would actually be a very bad thing. I just think it's such a unique institution. And I think that coupled with that, there's all these rules about what makes a good marriage, right? Like, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do the other thing. And we're told that if you don't do those things, then you have a bad marriage and there's something wrong with you. Right. And I just always think that's just ridiculous. I also think that's ridiculous for parenthood when people say those things about motherhood. Anyway, so that was the place I started. You asked how I wrote the book. I really start with an idea like that, a question I'm interested in. And then I'm like, all right, so who are my characters? How am I going to examine this question? And Amanda, who's the woman who dies, really came to me first. And the idea of that relationship she had, where she's kind of quite isolated in her marriage, because it's a bit, it's not abusive, but it's very distant. And that's a very subtle thing, right? Like to be alone in that way, where it's not necessarily cruel, but it's cold, and that leaves you alone and vulnerable in a particular way. So I was interested in that. So from there, I'm going to tell you, I don't outline a thing in advance. I really kind of get my characters, and I knew it was going to have this legal aspect and that the crime would have already happened. That's always true in my books, and that it would unfold. So I really need to get my two characters, and then I need to figure out just basically when I'm starting, like a time frame. And I have a general spot on the wall, like Amanda I knew was dead and somebody would have killed her, or she would have died somehow. And I kind of know the whodunit, or at least the who didn't do it. And because maybe the person who's responsible, maybe I don't know their character right at the beginning. So I start there, and then I really just start to write, believe it or not, scene by scene by scene. And I figure out most of my story as I go along, which means that my first drafts, if you write in that method, they call it like being a pantser, fly by the seat of your pants. Right, which is totally true, which is like what I'm doing every single day. So writing in that method, that means once you're done a first draft, it's extremely rough. I mean, it's not even a first draft by a lot of writers' standards. So it means my first draft process is like 3 or 4 months. My revision process is like another 9 to 12 months. A lot of my heavy lifting is in the revision. So once I have that first draft begins to function as an outline. And you can see the plot is incredibly intricate. And there are multiple points of views and different elements. There's non-narrative elements to the book. A lot of those come very late in the process. When I realize, for instance, one piece of the book is grand jury testimony that's sprinkled throughout. Well, part of the purpose of that is it gives you a sense of the community that you don't necessarily have, and the party, because you don't see the party until the end. And so I wanted you to have a window into that and into the community through those grand jury minutes. So you can see each serves a purpose, but I don't have it figured out in the beginning at all. I don't necessarily recommend this as a process. It's really quite terrifying, because as you're writing the whole time, you're like, I hope I figure this out. Like, it's a lot of, I forget who it was that said, it's some famous writer said that, I want to say like Norman Mailer, but I don't remember, could only write as far as his headlights. He could see as far as the headlights reach. And that's how I write. Like, I sit down on this day, I can tell you where I'm going here, but I can't tell you really anything else other than that. But I know so far it's worked out for me before. So I just keep with my method.
Well, it certainly worked out in this one too. I tell you, like I said, I enjoyed the complexity, because I felt like it held my interest. It was exciting. I don't know exactly how you did it. I don't know enough about writing, but the way that you were able to introduce new characters without me feeling like you were leaving characters behind. I don't know if that makes sense. Sometimes I feel like new characters come in and I kind of start losing track. I never lost track. And that's what I was amazed by.
That's excellent to hear.
It was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what helps in this book, there's a cast of characters, but there are 2 main narrators, and what's helpful is in both time frames, it's the same cast of characters largely, right? Like,
yes,
because you do have an outsider, a lawyer kind of coming in, but she's talking to the same characters who you're seeing in the other point of view. So it's additive. Like you do have, the information is building on itself. And, I think, again, a lot of those, the creation of suspense and the figuring out how much information to give comes in late stages. You have to really just continue to fine tune it to get a perfect balance of enough information so people understand what's going on and don't get lost, but leaving enough pieces out so that the puzzle part, again, I care about doing all these things about talking about a good marriage, but like in the end, it's a thriller and it's a puzzle. And I really want that part to work too. Like I want it to click into place and be really satisfying because I think it's great to be able to do both things.
So let's talk about the characters. Are they based on people you know? How do you, and the marriages? I mean, did you talk to your friends? Were they willing to open up? I mean, where did you find all these people? Did they all just come from your mind, or did you look around at friends and family?
Yeah, I think that in the end, I think for most writers, like all characters are to some extent some piece of you, some piece of people but generally refracted through a weird lens, right? Like it's very rarely direct. There is one character in this book, Victoria, who's a very minor character. She's Lizzie's best friend from law school, who's almost taken full cloth from my life. A very close friend of mine from law school named Victoria, who's my entertainment attorney, who negotiated the deal with Nicole Kidman and Amazon. So I just put her in there, and I wanted Lizzie to have a friend, and I just picked one of my law school friends and I put her in there. And again, the details of her life are different, but her personality is the same. And it's the way she would react to me if I called with these situations. And I did that because with really minor characters, it's very helpful to kind of have a hook in, because you only have, this character only appears in a few lines through the book, and it allowed her to come alive for me, even though she's so minor. So that's a character that's just like literally my friend. But by and large, like Zach, for instance, he is based on somebody I know, not a friend. And so it's somebody in my life, and it's, that kind of narcissistic personality where you think you can kind of control people like they're objects, and not people, and don't really lacking in empathy. Is based on somebody I know, but it's not a friendship like that. Although that friendship relationship thing that's very fuzzy is something I've been on both sides of. That's Lizzie and Zach have a relationship in law school that is a little ambiguous. Is it friendship? Is it not? And that leads to problems. And I think I've been on both sides of that, where I'm the one wanting it to be a relationship, or I'm the one like, oh, no, we're friends. So that, resonates. So you can see how each character is a little bit somebody I know, a little bit something I went through myself. Lizzie is the character who's most like me. She's the main character, the lawyer. I went to Penn Law like she did. I think we share a lot of central personality quirks. She eats candy obsessively. That's like one thing I put in that's definitely just me. So there are some things you steal like that from yourself. But it actually made Lizzie very hard to write at first, because she was similar to me. Because sometimes when a character is very like you under-explain them, because you're like, you assume people will get it. You're like, right? Everyone gets that. And then you're like, no, because that's your personality. No, not everyone gets that. My agent was like, no, not everyone knows that. You have to explain it. So sometimes she's now in the final version, she's much less like me than she was at the beginning, because I made sure she had nuance and really leaned into her. But I don't do that thing some writers do where they have like the whole like character tree, like on the wall with the like, or journals with the character details. I have to say I get very stressed out when I hear people have those, because I don't have them. And I feel like, am I supposed to have that? I don't have that. But I really feel my way there. And I will say that I really try to have the twists in the mystery be organic to the characters. I feel like that's really critical in making a mystery be believable and satisfying. I think if you make the twists, if you always ask yourself, like, would this character do this, and why would they do this? If you always return back there when you're writing, and it's hard because a lot of times you want something else to happen for plot reasons. But if you're always like, yeah, but why? Why would this person do that? Then you either have to build something into their character that makes it make sense, or you have to make a different plot choice. And so I do find that's really helpful, because it really, then it's helpful that I don't outline, because I'm really just being driven by who the people are. And then I hope that their behaviors resonate as more true to life than they would if I was driven merely by story.
Yeah. Yeah, I love hearing this. Yeah, everyone should get this book and read it after hearing all this. It's just very, very cool. So the timeline, I just want to tell you how I imagined it. So we know that Amanda has died. That happens very early in the book, if not before the book opens. I mean, it happens right away, right? I mean, that's like, but I sort of had the
technically she's already dead.
Right. Okay. I sort of had this feeling. So Amanda, who is the person who died, she's narrating before her death, and Lizzie narrates after her death. And I sort of felt like we were circling around her death. It's like, and we're getting closer and closer to what happened. Did you plan that, or is that just how I felt reading it, and other people might not feel that way, but I kind of felt like I was moving in on, what exactly happened to Amanda?
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's kind of like just two trains almost coming, right? Like they meet in the center and, you hope collide in a good way.
So great.
In an explosive way at the end. But you're right, they're traveling on two tracks approaching each other, which is, again, not planned in advance. But once I know enough about the story, then I'm like, okay, that's what we should be doing. Because it creates an inherent sense of tension. You have a clock ticking down. Amanda, that she dies, she's already dead at the beginning. And that she dies the night of the party. So her story is 5 days before the party, 4 days before, we're watching the countdown until the days before, you hope at the end that Lizzie finds out what happened to her, right? And that the two things will connect. And so that is in fact the point they're driving to. And it does help in the writing once I know that structure, because then I can keep going back and forth in leading you there, and hopefully in a way that's really suspenseful.
Yeah, and so many books that do that. I mean, when it's done well, it's so fun. But sometimes it's also very confusing. And I appreciated that I could just look and see who the narrator was and remember where I was. We're gonna go to questions, but I want to make sure I've given you the opportunity to share everything you want to share about the book before we go to the Q&A. Do you feel like you've had the opportunity? Oh, research. Did we want to talk about the research for the book?
Yeah, I mean, I was a lawyer, so there was a lot of, I will say one of the fun parts about the book was it is very much domestic suspense and a domestic drama, but it is also has this legal thriller part. And that part was fun because I got to finally use my law degree, and I took a bus out to Rikers and sat there, and there's some scenes that take place at Rikers Island, and I was there. And I have to say, it was a really, really, I've never done as much research as I did for this book. And it was fun to use that education and that experience. And it was a really interesting part of it.
Yeah. And having are they called briefs? Is that what we were looking at? The
transcripts.
The transcripts from the
grand jury.
Yes. And then also from Dade County School, the investigation they were doing into the email hack, that was also cool to be involved.
Yeah. Like another thread is that the parents have had their emails hacked into, and kind of their dirty laundry is aired at the same time all of this is going on. So
right.
Adding another kind of layer to it.
Yeah. Okay, Linda Marie, do we have questions for Kimberly?
Yes. The first one is, has the current pandemic changed your writing at all?
Oh boy. I mean, hasn't the current pandemic changed everything for everyone? My goodness. Yeah, it's definitely, again, I live in Brooklyn. I live in an apartment. So and I don't actually usually work from home. I usually work from the Brooklyn Writers Space, which is this kind of great office space where you have a desk and you go to, and I've always very much treated writing like a job. I go to and I come home from it. Not only is it like having your own business being a writer, so that's kind of a hard thing because you never leave it behind, but you literally have a hard time stopping, not thinking about whatever you're working on. You're always puzzling it through. So I like leaving it physically in another space. So Writing from home has been very difficult. Obviously, in these past couple of weeks, I've been focused on A Good Marriage. So that's been a little bit different doing things like this. But when I'm actually creating something new, I've had to work, like basically get up at like 3:30 in the morning. I do have two teenagers at home. So who, at least I don't have little kids that I'm trying to manage. But even just having anybody in the house is extremely difficult for me. So getting up really, really early in the morning gives me that quiet. I think it would be different if I was revising right now, but to really kind of, close my eyes and be somewhere else, I need that silence. So as this pandemic stretches on, we're having to try to figure out what we're going to do, because obviously waking up at 3:30 a.m. is not really a long-term solution. So we'll have to see, but it has made things harder. And I know there's like big debates, like, do you work more? Do you give yourself a break? For me, I feel like everyone should do whatever makes them feel better right now. That's like, whatever that is, we all need to get through the day. For me, kind of throwing myself into my work makes me feel better, less anxious about this kind of frozen moment we're all in. So anyway, so I have been working, but it's definitely not easy.
A fan of writing books on St. Simon's Island asks, when you're not writing, what are you reading? And what's on your nightstand right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. What's on my nightstand is Anna Karenina, which if anybody follows me on Goodreads knows that has been very slow going. So, it's hard for me when I'm writing new fiction. I just finished Megan Miranda's The Girl from Widow Hills, which is fantastic. I, blurbed that book. It's out June 23rd, which is terrific. And I read recently Mary Kubica's The Other Misses. Those are all great. And I do read, domestic suspense, particularly of like my friends and people whose work I admire. But when I'm really writing something new, it's hard to read in my own genre. I don't like to. I find it like, I have this weird sense that I'm going to like accidentally start writing what somebody else is writing. And I prefer to read nonfiction. I'm also reading a book on Buddhism. The title escapes me, so I'm not going to repeat it. But so I try to either read nonfiction, sometimes true crime and stuff like that, which I also enjoy. That I can read, or like a historical novel, a classic, because that invigorates the kind of same muscle, but it doesn't feel like it's competing with my work.
Who are a couple of the biggest influences in terms of authors? Who do you look up to or like most?
Oh, so many people. I think that one of the books I can remember, well, The Sound and the Fury, but also The Hours by Michael Cunningham were really revolutionary for me to read because of the structure. I was always like, when I was first trying to write books, and I didn't try to write books until like after law school. So, I wasn't trying like when I was very young. And I really was always kind of had this view that story was told in this orchestral fashion from multiple narrators. All my books are from like multiple narrators and with these non-narrative elements. And I really felt like, what am I doing? Is this like even a book? Like it's not like straightforward and I can remember reading The Hours and feeling very liberated to watch his storytelling. That's three different, the characters aren't even connected at all. And The Sound and the Fury, and then you realize that like it's been done a million times and a million people do it. And so that was very comforting to me. But also Gillian Flynn to me is like the gold standard in terms of combining a domestic drama with suspense. And a book like Gone Girls to me just, nearly flawless in terms of how it does that, and really leaves you thinking about things, but also, totally pinned to the pages. So I think you can see my inspirations are very, very broad.
When one of your books is optioned to be a movie, do you worry about how it will translate into the movie? Are you very involved in that process?
Well, I would say it depends. As I said, that I've had every one of my books has been optioned at some point. So it depends a little bit like who you're working with and the team and the circumstances. I will say that with Blossom and with HBO and then Blossom with Amazon, like I feel so supremely confident. And that is one of my favorite parts about working with them and why I wanted to work with them again, is that I have such confidence in their creative vision and their taste. And I feel like I know the choices they're going to make are going to be fantastic. And I've always felt like you should really try to choose your surgeon before the day of the operation rather than like getting involved in the operation like while it's happening. In an ideal case, that's not always going to be true. And hasn't always been true depending on who's been involved in my project. So I've been, more concerned or less concerned depending. I'm an executive producer on the project. I'm an executive producer on other projects. So that can mean all sorts of things. And it's early days for a good marriage. But again, I have a relationship with Blossom. And so I'm confident that I will be involved in the right way. I will say that my biggest objective is to see it get made. And it's really hard to get things for things to get made. As you probably see, things get optioned, and they really do get optioned by people who really want to get them made. I have to say my experience in the little bit that I've watched the process is it's really hard. There's so many people involved, and even with the best of intentions and the best of efforts, it's hard to get things made. So I'm excited to be as involved as I can be, and that in a way that makes sense.
A fan of the Bookworm in Powder Springs, Georgia, also went to Vassar and wonders what year you graduated, if you would share that, and if your time there had a lasting influence on your life.
Oh gosh, you're making me out how old I am. Yikes. I'm the class of 94. Now you are all sworn to secrecy. You can never tell anybody how old I am. So I was class of 94. That my time at Vassar was, and actually my next book is about a group of troubled Vassar grads that fan will be happy to know. So it's absolutely seminal for me. Like for me, college was where I found myself. I actually didn't write though in college. I found it a very creatively intimidating place. Vassar, people had already published short stories. They came and they were already like, I'm a writer. And there were a lot of children of very famous writers that I was friends with. So I didn't pursue writing there, but it was such a creatively dynamic place. And my friends that I met there are my family now. And so it was absolutely seminal to my life. Still is.
Combining a couple questions, could you talk about your transition from lawyer to writer?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, I didn't pursue writing at an earlier time. It really, for me, because of my background, I knew I really needed to have a job that where I could support myself and would have certainty. I had a high school teacher who was like, you have to be a writer. You have a gift. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Who is a writer? That's not a job. That's an interest. So I was like, I can't do that. And, again, I was a bit intimidated in college. So I ended up in law school. I did love law school. And, I was interested in the idea of being a lawyer. And I think I had a really romantic, like a lot of people, romantic notion about what it would be like. But law school's great. And I then graduated and practiced law for a couple of years. I worked at some of the biggest firms in Manhattan. I was a litigator, first at Cravath and then at Paul Weiss. And then you're actually doing the job, right? So once I had arrived, I was like actually a lawyer. I was like, oh my God, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? Like, I'm supposed to do this? Really, seriously? And so that was the first time I allowed myself, again, because of my own kind of personal circumstances, I was like, oh my God, like, what do I want out of my life? Like, I don't want this. And so I was able to take a leave of absence. I was lucky enough to do that and defer my law school loans, which were over $200,000 I paid for law school. But I was able to put them on pause and take a year and live off of savings for the year and write my first book. And I was like, I'll write a book in a year and then I'm going to publish it. I'm never going to go back and be a lawyer. But I wrote the book in a year and I got an agent and I almost sold it, but I didn't. And then my agent at the time was like, it's fine, just go back. You'll have to work, but just go back to work and write another book because we got so close. You'll sell the second one because you just will. So I did that. I wrote my second book every morning between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. And then I went off to my 90-hour-a-week job and I wrote my second book in a year. And I sent it off to my agent and I was like, this is great because I'm just like basically waiting for a paycheck because this is going to be so good. And so instead of that happening, I got an email on my 30th birthday that said, this book is not only unsellable, it is unsalvageable. You should put it away and start something new. And I can remember being so devastated. And at that point I realized that I was trying to just do it really fast. I wanted somebody to give me a guarantee that it was all going to work out. Right. And there's no guarantee in the arts ever. So I, finally realized I was going to have to give myself more time. By that point I was married. And I think it's important to know that, because I was lucky enough to have somebody who supported me financially, because a lot of times people are like, how do you do it? And I think you have to find a job that gives you the time to do it, or another circumstance. And mine was, I had a husband who was willing to do that. And I think we both believed the road wouldn't be that much longer, because I had already gotten so close. And it turned out it was way longer than we thought. I wrote 4 more books, and it took 11 years till I sold my first novel, and that was Reconstructing Amelia, and it was a 2-book deal. So I think by the end, I was looking for a job, and I was interviewing, but the bottom had fallen out of the economy at the time. It was 2008 or 9, and so I couldn't find a job. And that was the only reason I kept writing, was because I couldn't find a job. So, I always tell people, writing's it requires incredible hard work and dedication and all those things, but it also requires luck, and that is a piece of it. And I feel very lucky that in the end I sold my first book, because the truth is a lot of really, really gifted writers don't ever sell a book. And that's a reality of the business. So you have to know that going in, and it's definitely rejection is a huge part of it.
Linda Marie, we have time for one more question.
Okay. Did you get to meet Nicole Kidman?
I have not met her yet. I'm sure I will. I have corresponded with her, but I have not met her. I would expect I will one day.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for coming and sharing your Friday evening with me. And so nice to see your faces. You're the first reader faces live I've seen. So it's been a real treat. I really appreciate you having me. And thank you so much, Wanda, for moderating, and for all of you for the questions. And I really appreciate being a part of this. It was really great.
And thank you. This was wonderful. And if you enjoyed it as much as I did, let your bookstore know and order the book from them. We hope to be scheduling more authors, so please be in touch with your bookstore with any suggestions or ideas for how this could have been better for you. And order A Good Marriage from them. Thanks again, Kimberly, so much. And thank you, Linda Marie. And this is Wanda signing off. Y'all have a great weekend. Bye-bye.